Start with the big question.
Big question.
Yeah. Yeah, there are so many different kinds of aid. The sort of at its simplest is kind of government-to-government aid, which is most of the official aid budget that comes from the New Zealand government. They also give multilateral aid, that's through the institutions like the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, and then they give a little bit of their money through NGOs such as us. Never enough, but a little bit. And then the other kind of aid is the aid that NGOs raise from members of the public through charitable giving. So why development aid? You know, at its best, aid is a kind of hand up, not a handout. And it should be a way to strengthen people's assets and capabilities, not as a form of welfare. Because, you know, we know in this country, if you want to kind of help people get out of poverty, you don't just give them stuff and expect everything to be fine. What has been developed are programs that actually will enable people to be able to rely on skills acquisition, opportunities to earn money themselves, to be able to get jobs, to be able to work their way out of poverty, to be able to have decent health care and education. And that's the same kind of principles for overseas aid. That actually it's about people being able to have their rights. And their rights are, you know, education for all, basic health care, clean water, you know, decent livelihood, a voice on decisions that affect them. That's what aid should be supported. So that's what development aid should be for. Actually, some of it doesn't go for that. In fact, quite a lot of aid doesn't go for that. So, you know, when we think about if we want more aid, generally we ought to be saying we want more and better.
I'll just sort of emphasise here that to me it's about inequalities. To me it's about the fact that there are long-standing, sustained processes by which there are global inequalities. And we need to find many, many ways to deal with those inequalities, because I think there is a fundamental feature that everybody would share, and that is to have the right to equality. And so while aid is one way in which we can get there, it requires an understanding of how we get this kind of inequality. Inequalities occur in our own place, they also occur globally, and there are slightly different reasons for those happening, and a flow of funds from those who have it to those who don't also contributes very much to changing those places of inequality. So that's why we need to be looking at international aid.
I would probably come at it from a different angle. So as I understood the question, it was, why do developing countries need aid? So official development assistance, ODA, why do they need aid? And the answer I would come at it was not only because there's inequality. Yes, there is inequality, but I would look at the roots of this inequality. So I don't think we can necessarily divorce what is taking place today, or the situation in the third world today, with what has happened historically. So going back to the time, right, when the European colonial adventures began. And then if you say that first world luxury is the product of third world exploitation, then the reason that third world countries need aid is because they've been pillaged and robbed and raped by the first world. Since that has happened historically, then today they're in a position where they do need some assistance. And the question ends up being, what type of assistance? So that's the first part, as to why aid. Now the second part of the question, which is, which aid? And Barry made a good point that there's different types of aid. So there's a type of aid which is managed by NGOs like one sitting up here, right? And that makes up a fraction of the type of aid or the capital flows that go from the first world to the third world. Now this is a small portion, right? So if one were to put the figure and be generous and say that somewhere around 100 billion, right, makes its way from the first world to the third world, right, either by way of private investment, but also by way of public aid, so public money, then one has to also look at how much of that is coming back to the first world. So you have to also look at debt servicing. So if you look at debt servicing and include that, one can say there's a $100 billion flow from the first world to the third world, but then there's a $300 billion flow from the third world to the first world in debt servicing. So there's actually a net outflow of $200 billion from the third world to the first world. So when we say aid, what are we saying really? Right? There's a lot of things that we need to look at with regards to aid, and I hope we have a chance to examine that here today.
Just on that note, with how much money leaves, not just debt servicing, to give you an example of one Asian Development Bank, ADB Bank project that I was managing in Sri Lanka. Now the budget was $1 million. It was a PPTA, which is a project preparatory technical assistance. We were designing what the $80 million loan would look like. Now we had a team of experts, Westerners, going into Sri Lanka to design this project. And the budget just for those experts was $600,000 out of $1 million. So although that money was being spent in Sri Lanka, it was disappearing in the pockets of the experts and going straight back out of the country. And so one of the biggest criticisms, or one of the criticisms of the technical assistance delivery is that the money, so much of the money is ending up in the pockets of people who are consulting on these projects and marching straight back into bank accounts in their own country.